Dear speakers, guests, and friends, welcome to Angels Week in Switzerland. 2022 marks the first time that Switzerland is represented in the World Business Angel Investors Week. I am Xiaojing Chan, the inaugural country chair of Switzerland for Angels Week, and I cannot be more proud of our debut. In 2021, with an increase of 44% in invested venture capital money, the Swiss startup ecosystem has made an impressive comeback after the slight decline in 2020 due to the pandemic. And this is merely one chapter after an enduring growth that we have witnessed and benefited from in the startup world in Switzerland in the last 10 years. In 2012, the total venture capital market activity in Switzerland was $316 million, spread out in 61 fundraising deals. By 2017, both numbers had tripled, reaching an impressive $938 million raised and 175 deals closed. Last year, total funding raised by Swiss startups stood at $3 billion. Once again, our venture capital market has tripled compared to just 5 years ago. What is worth highlighting is that the number of funding rounds closed actually increased at a slower pace, at just 355 rounds, and what this shows is that Swiss startups are now able to raise more money with fewer rounds. The rapid growth not only demonstrates the rising quality of Swiss startups, but also the enthusiasm and confidence investors have in our ecosystem here. How has Switzerland managed to keep spirits so high in a global pandemic? An analysis in the sectors that produce the most number of startups answers this question, namely the ICT sector, including fintech, brought in the highest increase in venture investment, followed by clean tech and health tech. On the ICT front, digitization induced a transformation in how we live our lives at home, at work, on our computers, on our devices. COVID-19 then drastically fueled this digital transformation. We saw companies prosper, and we continue to see new companies innovating solutions to human needs, from basic needs like food and shelter to higher needs like love and education. On the other hand, health tech and clean tech enjoyed the spotlight on the global stage. World governments and multinational organizations focused resources as humanity gathered together in the face of the deadliest pandemic and climate change we have seen in decades. When it comes to innovation in health tech and clean tech, Switzerland has long been a pioneer. The 2021 Global Innovation Index ranks Switzerland again as the world's most innovative economy. Switzerland has topped this list now for the 11th time in a row. I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to all of our speakers, to our global chair of Angels Week, Bars, and to you for joining us in this forum. In the next 2 hours, you are in good company. We are very honored to have change makers in Switzerland as keynote speakers and roundtable panelists who are active leaders in startups, policymaking, venture capital, banking, and innovation. I hope you're ready to take some notes, because our keynotes and roundtables will certainly bring new insights for you into Switzerland and how we are building the future in this beautiful country. Thank you.
Dear presidents, dear prime ministers, dear ministers, continental chairs, country chairs, and dear participants. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, business transformation was a concern of big companies. but now it is imperative, and not just for large enterprises. Even the smallest companies and organizations must transform their business as a matter of urgency in order to cope with dynamics of the post-pandemic business environment. Surveys reveal that most small companies and entrepreneurs in the startup economy are suffering financially. Their plight will become even more serious if they have not been able to complete their business transformation before the new normal sets in. The challenge is this: business transformation is not a cheap process. How realistic is it to encourage entrepreneurs to invest in business transformation when they are struggling just to meet their short-term expenses? Given this situation, as an affiliated partner of the G20 Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion, the World Business Angels Investment Forum invites policymakers to develop smart policies that will provide financial support for startups, scale-ups, SMEs, and all entrepreneurs to help them transform their business. WBAF believes that more public-private partnerships should be mobilized for this purpose, and governmental recovery plans need to include financial support for entrepreneurs' business transformation efforts. Governments must be alerted to the fact that unless small companies receive financial support for transforming their business, they will not be able to survive in post-pandemic times. This means their capacity to create more jobs and social wealth for economies will be lost. I would like to thank in advance all the stakeholders and partners who will be contributing to World Business Angel Investors Week 2022. They will be highlighting the importance of business transformation for post-pandemic times, the topic of this year's event. I believe to grow and thrive in a post-pandemic world, swift business transformation into a pandemic-proof organizational model is vital if we are to ensure the sustainability of world economies in the new normal. I would like to thank the organizing committee and colleagues who will be taking roles as continental chairs, country chairs, global partners, keynote speakers, and panel discussants. Their combined efforts will create value for the world's startup economies, not only during this week, but in the future as well. They will focus on harnessing the collective knowledge of the world's most influential women leaders, policymakers, entrepreneurs, and artists with a view to addressing critical issues of early-stage equity markets in the new normal. This week will be a great platform from which to campaign for solutions to such critical issues and other worldwide concerns at the United Nations, the European Union, and in G20 countries and regional and local economies. World Business Angel Investors Week 2022 is celebrated in 132 countries of 5 continents and 2 regions, with more than 200,000 participants from around the world, 320 keynote speakers, 765 distinguished panel speakers, addresses of 12 presidents, 6 prime ministers, 32 ministers. This is really great. And it is a great pleasure for the World Business Angels Investment Forum to coordinate this particular event of the world globally. The ultimate goal of all of the week's keynotes, discussions, presentations, and workshops is to agree on a common roadmap for entrepreneurs, startups, and SMEs that will enable them to emerge from this pandemic period even stronger than they were before. I have good news, by the way. The next World Congress of Angel Investors will be in person on 25 and 26 of October in Antalya of Turkey. This will be the first global convergence of world investors, public funds, startups, angel investors, wealth management institutions after Mr. COVID started traveling around the world. So I am very excited to see all of you in person next October in Antalya. and our Congress topic will be digital transformation for post-pandemic economies. We will discuss this week business transformation, and we will discuss digital transformation next October in Turkey. And we will collect all our collective knowledge and we'll go on thriving to empower the world economy through innovation, entrepreneurship, and angel investment. I'm confident that each participant in the World Business Angel Investors Week will benefit from the collaborative ideas, know-how exchange, training programs and workshops, and global networking opportunities that are offered. I believe that by working together across borders with a common vision and smart dynamics in mind, we are well placed to bring about positive change in the global economy. Thank you very much for joining our global efforts to ease access to finance for entrepreneurs, promote gender equality, increase financial inclusion, and promote the importance of digital inclusion for post-pandemic times. Thank you.
Dear participants of the World Business Angel Investors Week 2022 in Switzerland, a very warm welcome from my side to a conference full of insights, networking, new opportunities, and last but not least, business ideas. Investing in Zurich was the best decision we have ever made. This statement does not come from the mayor of Zurich or the Minister of Economy, nor does it come from me, a person whose job is to promote Switzerland's business and technology center internationally and to attract new companies to our region. No, this statement comes from Eric Schmidt, the former head of Google and its parent company Alphabet. Investing in Zurich was the best decision we have ever made is the conviction of a global technology leader that has expanded its presence in Zurich from 2 employees to more than 4,200 in just over 15 years, making it Google's largest and most important research and development hub outside the USA. If you take a closer look at the success stories of numerous global technology leaders and countless innovative startups, including several unicorns such as WeFox in Switzerland and the Greater Zurich area, you quickly realize investments in companies, but also investments by companies in other companies and startups, or in Switzerland as a location, are favored by 3 factors. First, innovation and talent. Second, international openness. Third, stability and reliability. Of course, these 3 factors influence and depend on each other. And I think that in this combination they are unique in the world and have made Switzerland and the Greater Zurich area an excellent place to invest and to do business. A few thoughts. With an increase of 44% in invested capital and the breakthrough of $3 billion mark, the Swiss startup scene has made an impressive comeback after the slight decline in 2020, with records in trade sales, IPOs and new funds. Investments in Swiss startups have been on a growth trajectory for 10 years, and the increase has accelerated significantly in recent years. Since 2018, this means within 3 years, the amount invested has almost tripled, whereas the first tripling took almost 6 years. One reason for the impressive numbers is the activity of new Swiss funds, and this will continue to increase. This year's Fund Radar lists 35 new funds from Swiss providers, breaking the record. The large number of funds, in turn, is due not least to the numerous successful exits. 11 IPOs and 55 trade sales took place in 2021. Switzerland is a small, landlocked country with virtually no natural resources. To achieve our wealth and quality of life, Switzerland has always had to be open in business and science. We have been striving for the best talents and technologies, capital, entrepreneurship, and networks. Today we are one of the most interconnected economies in the world. Switzerland is highly dependent on foreign trade. We have access to the European single market without being a member of the European Union. To have a company in Switzerland means to have access to more than 500 million consumers in Europe. It means that you can easily recruit talent from any EU member state thanks to bilateral agreement on the free movement of persons agreement. Switzerland also has free trade agreements with 40 partners outside the European Union, including China, Japan, the Republic of Korea, and Canada. The international openness is also reflected in research and teaching. A majority of professors and PhD students at our top universities are foreigners, which creates and promotes open and international research networks. This in turn leads to a high number of spin-offs with foreign founders. 3/4 of the venture capital for Swiss startups also comes from abroad. Every business activity is associated with risks, especially in the environment of startups, which is all about innovation, growth, and internationalization. Technological progress is just as uncertain as commercial success. If at least the environment in which you are operating is stable and predictable, this is all the more of an advantage. In this context, Swiss reliability is to be understood comprehensively. It is about the stability of the political and legal system, currency, sound public finances, which means low level of public debt, the tax system, and business and innovation-friendly regulations in general. This also includes functioning infrastructure, social security, education, and healthcare. Reliability in this sense also covers Swiss quality in all areas of life. In short, a stable, reliable environment reduces the overall risk of investment significantly. Believe me, it's not only the beautiful nature and the fine chocolate and cheese that made Eric Schmidt of Google say, "Investing in Zurich was the best decision we have ever made." It's the whole package you get when investing in Switzerland. I hope the short overview has given you the big picture of how interesting, dynamic, and thriving the Swiss startup, business, and science scene is, and that I was able to convince you that Switzerland and the Greater Zurich area are worthwhile to think of when considering investment opportunities. Thank you very much and have an insightful Congress.
My name is Liliana Kirchknopf. I'm heading the Private Sector Development Division at SECO, the State Secretariat for Economic Affairs, in the Department of Economic Cooperation and Development. I've been working for many, many years on private sector development and impact investing. And I'm really excited that we managed over the last years to set up the very first social impact bond in a developing country in Colombia with the government and the IDB lab, which was a major innovation in how to provide social services in a country, much more effective and promoting innovation. And I'm also looking forward to telling you more about our new initiative, the SDG Impact Finance Initiative. It is a pleasure to take part in the World Business Angel Investors Week in this session focused on Switzerland. We share the World Business Angels' mission of cultivating finance for businesses that generate decent jobs and help to build sustainable societies. Switzerland has a unique ecosystem that makes us well positioned to support entrepreneurship, both at home and abroad. We are a leading financial center with over 250 banks, 200 plus asset managers and 200 insurance and reinsurance companies. We have a deep knowledge and expertise in impact finance, with 1/3 of the asset worldwide being managed out of Switzerland. We were one of the pioneers in bringing microfinance to scale, and also in the space of impact bonds, we have been front runners with the setup of the first social impact bond in an emerging country, Colombia, with the buy-in of the government and in cooperation with the Inter-American Development Group. We are also a global hub of multilateralism. Geneva is the second seat of the United Nations and hosts 39 UN entities and over 400 NGOs dedicated to solving some of the world's most pressing challenges, including ensuring effective humanitarian response in conflicts and disasters, upholding human rights, and achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Additionally, we have a rich tech ecosystem. From Crypto Valley to Campus Vitek and Trust Valley, we are committed to building technology the world needs. We are, for instance, supporting the development of the ecosystem for blockchain-based startups in South Africa. The numbers confirm the potential. Since the pandemic, tech companies grew 2.3 times more than their non-tech counterparts. In my work at the Swiss Secretariat for Economic Affairs, we support developing countries strengthen their economic framework conditions to make them more resilient and sustainable post-COVID and in line with the Paris Agreement. Let me give you a few examples. In the area of finance and entrepreneurship, we help deepening local capital markets and local currency lending. We work on improving the business environment and the ecosystem for startups through the Swiss Entrepreneurship Program in Vietnam, Peru, Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, North Macedonia, and Serbia. And through the SECO Startup Fund, we provide loans to startups domiciled in Switzerland wanting to venture into developing and emerging markets and creating a development impact. CIFEM, the Swiss Investment Fund for Emerging Markets, the Swiss DFI, Development Finance Institution, invests, on the other hand, in local and regional funds that on-lend to growing businesses. Important to us is to measure the development impact these instruments and programs have. I want to call your attention to two recent important initiatives that we welcome other countries to participate in. Firstly, we have launched in December 2021 the SDG Impact Finance Initiative that supports the design and scale of innovative finance solutions that drive capital to businesses contributing to the SDGs in developing nations. We aim to raise 100 million Swiss francs to unlock 1 billion in capital for SDG finance by 2030. Currently, we are about to secure 1/3 of the funds from the public side and private foundations. You can either join by co-financing the initiative or by informing interested parties to submit proposals in line with the open calls for proposals. The first one is still open until the end of June and is being managed by Convergence. Secondly, every year, Building Bridges takes place, a global conference dedicated to SDG finance that brings together the financial industry, the international community, and governments to build a sustainable financial system with a positive impact. This year's edition will take place October 3rd to 6th in Geneva, and we welcome all of you there to continue the discussions you begin here today. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and I look forward to hearing about the outcomes of this important forum.
And a wonderful good afternoon from Switzerland, from our side today. Thank you very much for joining us to this exciting roundtable, Venture Capital from Angels to Funds. This afternoon, we're going to be speaking to our three panelists, XJ, Sophie and Bea. XJ, might you please kindly kick off with introducing yourself?
I am very honored, first of all, to serve as the country chair for Angels Week in Switzerland. And I'm especially honored because it's our inaugural event. So this is the first time that Switzerland has hosted Angels Week. And we have worked very hard on getting great people, leaders, to speak at our roundtable. So a little bit background about myself. I was born in Taiwan, grew up in Michigan, went to school near Chicago, and then was a management consultant in Hong Kong. And then did my PhD at the University of Zurich. I've been living in Switzerland for 9 years. And then in 2016, I started angel investing. And now I've founded and run a startup called Venturepol. We build smart tools for venture investors. And the origin story is that I was angel investing in 2016. I asked my co-investors what tools were they using. Everyone said Excel spreadsheet. And I said, it's not very helpful for early stage angel investing. And that's how Venturepol was born. We built tools that we would want to use as investors. And then I fundraised for Angelpol and sat on the other side of the table as a founder and had personal experience with investor bias. And so it took me double the average meetings to raise a seed round, and I was only able to raise a quarter of the average seed round. And so it's become a personal mission of mine to help female founders fundraise and also diverse founders. So what we are doing is we are now launching a fund for startups building on Bitcoin, building for Bitcoin, and we will especially have priority for diverse founders who are building for Bitcoin. We will release this exciting news later this year.
Exciting. Thank you very much, XJ. Sophie, you're the next one on my screen.
Thank you very much. So I'm Sophie, I'm French and from Paris, lived in London and then now in Zurich for 10 years plus. I have been an angel investor since 2016, like you, XJ. My background is in finance, but not as a banker, more as a client, relationship, business development, marketing. I've launched my own company as well with my Dutch co-founder Caspar, and we have a sustainable angel investing platform. It's based in Switzerland, but covering Switzerland, Europe, and next step the world. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation, because I believe and we believe in helping and supporting and sharing our knowledge, our network, our the people we know that they as entrepreneur, and we're here for that, and to give you as well some points in in this very interesting ecosystem where everybody can actually join. And this is all about the community.
Absolutely. So you say, Sophie, we really look forward to hearing more what you have.
If I may jump in here, this is why Sophie sits on this roundtable, and this is why Venturepol and Sophie's Alpine Angel Club are partners. We share our
definitely. We have the same values. What we want is really reaching out to as many people as possible on the entrepreneurs and investor side. And it's not a club for millionaires or people really financially super comfortable. It's everyone can get in and everyone can really make a difference, and that actually and support very valuable founders, and especially with my personal favorite of for decades now is empowering women on the founder side, but as well on the investor side. Sorry, Bea, I think it's your turn now.
No, happy to go. I'll start with when I'm 75, because then I'd like to retire and close the books on my commercial activities. And until then, between now and then, I hope to have raised probably about 3 venture funds. I would like to have a couple, big successes among those, but I'm also happy with small successes, honestly. Mm-hmm. And I would like to continue pursuing an idea I have about weather. And I'll talk to anyone who's willing to listen, because I'm just happy if it gets implemented either by myself or by someone else. I have a particular idea for how we could document weather, better than today's apps. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to get more engaged politically and also on boards. And what brings me here is a career spent in IT. I studied computer science at Cal in Berkeley from 1986 until 1990, and then worked in the field for 5 years for UBS, got my MBA, worked for McKinsey for 5 years. And since then, since about 2001, I've been an entrepreneur and have been developing products, about 5 to 7 so far. And I look forward to sharing ideas with you guys about how to invest.
And if you guys are in good for the audience, you're in good company today, because if you heard, Bea is a very ambitious GP. Goal is 3 funds, and I imagine they're going to be big.
Definitely. So let's kick off the roundtable. What I want to hear from you guys first is your investment theses. What's the philosophy? What methodologies? What do you look for when you're about to invest? Sophie, would you like to go first?
Well, yes, of course. Well, at Alpine, we have 3 pillars, for example. So that helps funnel down really to what we want to invest in. Technology, okay, easy one. UNSDG, less easy, surprisingly a lot less easy. And diversity. And diversity is obviously you have facts, but you have as well a mentality. It's a mentality to to see how you can be diverse. And as I said, I like to say, we're not going to penalize my friends to start a company as long as they are the right, diversity mindset. This is actually then, when you tick all those boxes, you don't have that much left, to be really honest. And after that, what you need really to look at, as we said a bit earlier in the conversation, off record, I think, it's a team. The team makes it happen. You can have the best product in the world, the best, financials, market, everything. But if the team is not on the same foot, in the same page, it's not going to happen. And the other thing we look at, because we're not in the philanthropy business, I have to say, and not myself neither, it's the scalability. You need the team, you need to check if they think big or big enough. It's better to reduce, to slow down, reduce, regroup, than actually to think too small and to try to make it bigger. That doesn't work that way. It's like cooking. When you half or you double, the cake is not the same.
Would you agree with that, Bea?
My thoughts were triggered by that, about some small and modest business plans that I have seen that were enough for me to invest. And so I think you always have the question of which investor requires what kind of time, time series. You always have the time series when you look around where it's this big hockey stick, right? And when I see gigantic hockey sticks, I ask myself the question, which investor that they're trying to recruit as an investor actually asked them to do that? And maybe it was you, Sophie, because I don't ask them to do that. I am very disinterested in these hockey sticks. And while they may turn out that way, it's maybe 1 in 10 that turns out that way. So I prefer to focus on a proprietary advantage. I would never have started the tool without the peer-to-peer protocol that founded it. I would never have founded a Laburo without already having done the tool, because it's both in the media business. There's a few advantages to that. Likewise with Genistat, which is a data science firm. We're doing, official TV data measurements. We got our jumpstart building data science for the tool. And now with Fanfare, which is a blogging startup that does video feature analysis. So you can submit them a quick chat, let's say the Zoom chat, and it'll extract the key moments, for snackable content for sharing on social media and so on. So that this is all related. That's the proprietary advantage. And second, I look for any sort of gating. The tool was gated first technologically, but we broke through that. Then it was gated by the question, do we get content? And we broke through that. Then it's gated by the question, do end users actually enjoy watching TV? It's such an old thing, isn't it? It turns out, yeah, they actually do enjoy it. And then the third, big gate is, can we actually commercialize it? Do we find a way to pay for this? So I think as you take a product to market, if you are gated, like as in an earlier startup of mine, by IBM being your fantastic partner who's going to bring you the data center automation company that I, co-created. If they're your means for getting to customers, then you're screwed, because IBM has a completely asymmetric relationship to you. For them, they're betting, that much of their reputation, but for you, it's all of your reputation and your entire existence, right? And so IBM always wants to be cool and offer their customers a bit more than the normal IBM toolkit. So you're just helping them to be cool. So whenever I see any sort of go-to-market that is not only relying on something like that, but even worse, touting, in big letters saying, our partners IBM, that's a complete no-go.
That is such a gold nugget for all founders watching this. And it's especially valuable because I met Bea. We both sat on the jury at the digital entrepreneurship competition at the University of Zurich. And Bea always had the best questions for founders. And I think this is because she is a founder. She's built this, she's very familiar with the rodeo show, and she can instantly spot what needs to be improved, what's the biggest weakness, what's the biggest strength, where she just demonstrated just now. So that's for go-to-market strategy for founders. And sales cycles are really long if you go for big corporations. And there you go, that's wisdom right there. For our fund, Venturepool is, again, launching a fund early next year. For our first fund, we are serving startups who are building for Bitcoin or startups who are building on the Stacks protocol, which is also for Bitcoin. We see human needs being addressed by cryptocurrency. And Bitcoin, in our opinion, also in my opinion, is still royal. Bitcoin has a royal status. No cryptocurrency will replace it. It will always be the benchmark. But we have we have this $10 billion value for Bitcoin, but we don't have enough apps built for Bitcoin, and we see a tremendous opportunity there. And then, so that's one. This is this is what our focus on the technology, on the sector. Two, we will give priority to diverse founders. Women, non-white, LGBTQ, older founders, disabled founders. We especially love you.
Thank you for sharing that, XJ. It's so very inspirational. I really look forward to seeing how this fund takes off next year. Before Bear went into it already, and this is a question I was really looking forward to hearing from you guys, when it comes to investments and when it comes to investing, what for you guys are deal breakers? And Bear already mentioned it, the big IBM sign, but what about you, Sophie and XJ? I'd love to hear from you. What are the deal breakers when it comes to investing for you guys?
I have to say, for example, if they come straight away with, can you sign an NDA? And yeah, we had that a few times. And this is, for some, I would understand when there's really a high technology, but then it's only useful when you start doing a due diligence, really asking, deep down question on technology. You have to tell them, your own proprietary and, the technology software, what it is. And then eventually I can, but that's us, twice. And it was a good company, but they asked us to sign an NDA right away. And they said, we can't ask our angels, to the members, to all of them to sign an NDA before even, meeting you. So that's definitely a deal breaker. And obviously, when even before the first call, when we do a triage, when the conversation and just getting some financial answers, it's very difficult. I'll come back to the team, and it's exactly what you said, Yasmin. The people behind the products is very important, and you need to have that good fit. So if it's the communication is already a bit difficult, it's just it's not a very good start. I would say there, those two.
Oh, great input. Thank you, Sophie. XJ, what about you?
Yeah. And there's another gold nugget from Sophie, a tip from an investor. If you don't know this already yet, we're not going to sign NDA, especially not on our we're sorry, like that's not going to happen. And we'll tell you why. Because we talk to so many companies and founders, and we cannot be legally liable for that, right? And we always talk to our co-investors. We have investor friends, and so no, like NDAs, no. And then so thank you, Sophie, for that.
Yes.
Super valuable. Personally, as an angel, I don't invest in all white men teams, founder teams. If I see all white men, I will ask, why are you all white men? And if the answer I get is, well, we tried,
yes,
we tried, but we just couldn't find a suitable, diverse person, then I won't invest until I see more effort put into diversity. Because I can tell you, ROI I see more. We see stats. We see constantly. We see ROI equals to DEI. You want to make returns, you must have diversity, equity, inclusion. Because your customers are most likely going to be diverse too. The people you're serving are not going to be all white and all men. So that's me personally. Now, this personal deal breaker is personal because for the fund, which is a Web3 Bitcoin fund, we very, very unfortunately don't see enough women. We don't see enough women in crypto, in Web3 yet. But I have to say that the women that we do see, especially artists minting NFTs or engineers building cool stuff, I love them. But are we going to be investing in all white men, all white crypto bros? Probably, yes. So here you can see I have a different, it's different here.
You mentioned it's about the people, right? You said it's about the people, that's the human capital behind that. That is such an important thing when it comes to where you invest. But the question actually also is, it's not just about who you invest in or which company, but who you invest with. Who do you co-invest with? Is this also something that's really interesting or important for you guys? I've just knocked my computer. Bea, do you look to see who's also investing in the same venture capitals that you invest in?
Again, the answer changes over time, and it changes for what purpose. I have co-invested in a venture where Kleiner Perkins was invested. I thought, wow. However, that was a dud. It was an angel investment. I lost 150K. Then I invested in another venture where the founder was the former assistant of Marissa Mayer from Google. Was a dud, lost 50K. Then I invested in a venture where the founder was a serial entrepreneur, had successfully exited before. That was a trade sale, but then it was a trade sale to a startup from Qualcomm that actually a McKinsey friend of mine was leading, and it failed. And I think that about sums up my losses in the venture space so far. Fortunately, all of my European investments have been successful, and none of them were particularly gold-plated. There was nothing, famous about them. Zatu was done with family offices. The three other firms I mentioned, I'm doing them myself. I may eventually involve VCs. It really depends, So I don't name shop. I don't name drop. I really look for passion. And if I may add something about your bias for fringe groups and so far disadvantaged groups, XJ, I think I find it commendable that you really rally for these people, give them an unfair advantage. If they come to you, they'll be actually treated better, I assume. And I think that restores an element of fairness and balance. I do, however, think that you may want to pursue another aspect of this in particular, which is the tenacity and sort of MacGyver-like scrappiness that I look for in a founder. If someone's disabled or marginalized, it turns out they are often hardy they did not have an easy life. Not everything was served on a silver platter. Their parents did not write their high school thesis and such kind of nonsense, right? Which is actually pretty widespread in Switzerland and especially in the US. So there's their experience was more self-reliant, more more make do than can do, and but in a good way. And I think I look forward to reading then about the returns from your fund, because I can imagine that there's a positive correlation between people who've had hardships who then also perform really well in their entrepreneurial path. And why? Because of what I said. And I think additionally, I'd like to say that a startup is a learning machine. I think few people understand this. A large company is not a learning machine. A large company really knows how to make, I don't know, glass thin, or how to make bits fly fast, right? Whatever it is that they do. A startup doesn't. They think they do, but they don't. So then they learn, they adapt. And I think a person who's disadvantaged, has been pushed to the fringes, has gone through a life of having to continuously relearn, readapt. They're basically a foreigner in any environment, even in their own country. They're a foreigner because they're handicapped or they have a different color. So I think this kind of constant learning may also be a good foundation for a startup.
I like that point, Bea. I have to say, I never thought about that, but within diversity, you have, yes, those people had to learn and adapt and try and fail and win and do it again. Yeah, thanks for that point. It's a very nice. Yeah.
I can listen to Bea for hours. I kid you not. She is this trove of this treasure trove. And so what we just heard, let me sum it up for you guys. Her learning as an investor is that pedigree does not guarantee success, does not guarantee returns. And
no.
And I must say, she is an outlier in this. Investors I talk to in Silicon Valley, everyone is talking to Stanford alumni, ex-Apple, ex-Google, right? So everyone's looking at the same 10 deals. And then valuation gets pumped up. But then people who don't have these pedigree, but who are really solving human needs, you don't even get to meet investors, right? You're not in the network. You don't have access to the investor networks. But Bea has proven that when you take a different approach and you look at the person, not just papers, degrees, this is where you find the gems. And then for diversity, again, I have high admiration for Bea, and also there is a special connection here because both Bea and I are openly out. We're both in the LGBTQ community, and if I may say so, for both of us, we're proud that we are in this community. And so we both know what it is like to be outliers, to be unique, to be different in a world that encourages conformity. And we know what it is like to personally be brave and say, we're different, we're going to take the path less traveled, and we are unapologetically going to go on this path and just find ways to get where we want to go. And again, it's tenacity, it is grit, but also it is smarts. Book smart, street smart. You know, we find ways to, you know, for example, what Bea just said, you need to always validate what you're doing, right? So she talked about the gates or the moats for Zatu, which is a very successful company she's built, and I think that's also a very valuable lesson there.
Thank you very much, XJ, for that excellent summary. What I'm taking away is your last 3 points: from angels to funds. It takes tenacity, grit, street smart, and an awful lot of human capital. This has been the main message. Panelists, Bea, Sophie, XJ, thank you ever so much. I could have really gone on for hours listening to you guys, and I really hope to meet you all personally for a cup of coffee or a drink soon. Thank you very much for joining us. Hello and welcome back this afternoon to the second roundtable here in Switzerland for the World Business Angel Investors Week. In this session, we will be focusing on technology, banking, and the importance of networks in Switzerland. Boy, do we have a treat in store for you guys this afternoon. Joining me on the panel today is Andreas Eaton, CEO of F10, the FinTech Accelerator for the Swiss Stock Exchange, Günther Dobrau, Partner and Head of Legal at PwC in Switzerland, as well as Partner at the Excelix Capital AG. We have Nicolas Huras, the Managing Partner at Mika Group and co-founder of New Native. And last but certainly not least, we have Sergali Abdilbekov, Head of the Global Strategy for Wealthy Client Communities at UBS. Thank you everybody for joining us. We're going to dive straight in with the first question this afternoon. And the question is, how are banks, stock exchanges and large institutions and institutional investors in Switzerland innovating? And more importantly, who are the movers and shakers? Who would like to go first?
Well, maybe I go first. It's a super interesting question. And first of all, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I think the one thing we've seen, and obviously COVID has been a little distorting everything, but I think it's the big guys as well as the small guys really starting to innovate in a way we haven't seen it before. And that's quite interesting because obviously, yes, there is the startup scene, which is very important, but we at least see more and more collaboration across the board these days.
Maybe can I add from my side? Thanks very much also for the invitation. It's great to be in that amazing round here. I think Switzerland, especially also the banks, they really started to embrace collaboration between kind of startups and established institutions. I think we from F10, that's a bit our mission, right? We want to bring together the two different worlds. And what we've seen in the past is that there's quite some innovation coming from startups and ending up at, like big banks to be scaled up there and used, for, better servicing the end customer.
Maybe something to add from my side is the fact that we see the DeFi actually coming into the picture. There's also the DeFi within the banking sector, how it actually integrates and disintegrates different teams. So there's teams inside the company that become sort of self-sustainable business units that produce different solutions that can be outsourced, etc., off the banking system, and then come back to be insourced as a partner to the given bank. The same comes from the outside. There's plenty of startups, plenty of fintechs that are actually created by ex-bankers, well, like myself, for example, and then the services that we provide automatically get integrated into the main bank as the core business working. So I call it sort of like a decentralized structure that works together in tandem with the core really taking care of the regulatory framework and all the fintechs supporting with different solutions, the main structure.
Maybe just a comment from my side. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. First of all, I'd like to make a little distinction between banking and private banking, since we're talking about Switzerland. Banking usually encompasses all kinds of banking: commercial, corporate, retail, investment banking, and so on. Whereas private banking, and specifically Swiss private banking, means mostly wealth management for rich individuals. Now, having said that, you probably all know, it's not a secret, that every single private bank is trying to innovate. We have a bunch of teams that are called innovation teams or discovery teams, or new experiences or new projects, special projects, call it whatever you want. I guess the question, who are the movers and shakers? It's a bit premature to say who out of the big private banks is really moving, because everybody is trying to do something, but there is too much duplication and too little information still in order to actually produce something meaningful. Therefore, probably the banks are looking outside too. And outside is the venture capital. Any startups, any fintechs, anything that is currently innovating without the regulatory framework of the banks to hold them down and slow them down. So the banks are, I guess, forthcoming with some mergers and acquisitions or investments or anything like that in order to sort of source from this inflow of new ideas.
And just let me add, Sergey, actually very good point you made here. And the distinction actually very important. When I was based in Singapore, I was on the board of a digital innovation of one of the investment committees in the industry. And what we have seen actually, and you know it very well from the big banks, the most money for innovation goes to the private banking. And most money from the innovation is focused on private banking. So the main solution that we see and we've seen so far was on payments, was on robo-advisors, focus on better servicing for wealthy clients, whereas the asset management side or fund management side has been actually stayed in the shadows, which without enough financing coming into the picture. So we feel that going forward, this is the sector that's going to start innovative next and taking advantage of the solution that have been already developed for wealth management for private banking, and that will be afterwards adjusted using blockchain, all the new technologies to service the rest of the bank and the rest of the teams of the bank.
Thank you. We would like to focus on a very specific type of technology, namely artificial intelligence. Now, Sergey, you co-run the Swiss Artificial Intelligence Association. And what I would really like to know from you is, what role does it play today in banking? What are its limitations? And where do you see it 5 years from now?
Absolutely. AI is very dear to my heart. When it comes to it, it's all about privacy and processing of the data that the banks gather on individuals. There are plenty of interesting AI projects that cross-match the data to sort of extract the calls to action for the bankers and for whoever, for the partners of the bank. When is the best time to talk to the client? What does it mean when the client talks to the bank or to the banker or to the assistant? What are the client's priorities? Which other products would the client truly benefit from in that moment? Which state of the mind does client come to the bank with? And all these questions, AI currently is trying to AI industry is trying to answer. Some of these technologies are developed internally, but as I already mentioned, a greater number is developed outside of the banks. If we speak about the stage of development of the industry, it's probably fair to say that the whole industry still has a long way to go before we can claim that AI is meaningfully contributing to the client's needs. One of the most coveted AI use cases, to my mind, is the NLP, natural language processing, voice recognition and transcription, so that a voice bot or a virtual assistant for that purpose would be able to recognize clients' instructions 100% of the time correctly, and subsequently do trades, do processing of the documents or payments or open and close accounts, etc. Where I see the limits, it's actually very simple. I already mentioned this. It's a cultural transformation that is currently taking such a long time. The large banks need to secure a permanent inflow of high quality innovation. The only reasonable way to do it, in my opinion, is not by supporting multiple duplicated innovation teams springing up here and there, but rather creating a meaningful venture capital fund with at least $1 billion in capitalization to ensure the skin in the game and the efficient time to market.
You all agree? Andreas, you were
can
nodding.
only echo what Sergali said. You know, when you look a little bit at the past of what happened in corporate innovation at the banks, I mean, when I remember 2015, that all the banks started their own innovation labs, tried to hire a lot of engineers and talents. In the meantime, I think that most of them have been stopped because it's very difficult in that kind of highly regulated environment really to build up new stuff or invent new stuff. That's why I also fully agree on his statement that these kind of things, these really innovative things are happening outside, where you have less, restrictions and less constraints. So from that point of view, I think this is like the transformation happened since, we were active in bringing together the two different sides, like the startups and the corporates, that eventually now like investing into promising new technologies is probably the way how you can actually source innovation from the outside to the corporate side, especially in banking, which is a little bit different to other industries, where R&D is much more, at the core of the business, which is in the banking definitely not the case.
Thank you for speaking to the converter. Sorry, I monopolize here a little bit more, but you're speaking to the converter because actually at New Native, that's what we do pretty much. We are the accelerator for artificial intelligence solutions in fintech and not only. So we work on several solutions at a given time, invest money, have a private equity fund that invests in these different solutions. So thank you for supporting that. Going back to Sergei, to your point on the client servicing, I think also one thing that is worth mentioning within artificial intelligence is also the use of transformers, and the use of transformers in terms of the conversation with the client, the automatic responses to the client, the mitigation of client satisfaction, dissatisfaction, or even creating a proper meaningful marketing or proper meaningful advisory models that can be used using artificial intelligence. And that's something we will see coming, especially in wealth management and in investment banking in the next coming years. And we don't even realize when we work now, for example, the OpenAI, and we see what all the solutions that are already out in the market, how advanced they are and how quickly can they be implemented into the market. So we are here for a very exciting ride in artificial intelligence.
I think it's also important to note that in particular, when we talk about artificial intelligence, we haven't seen the dominant design emerge yet, right? There is many trying to bring their ideas to market, but it's still predominant design. I think we've seen a lot of machine learning and so forth, and a lot of stuff that is being worked on right now. But especially when you talk about the bigger banks, they're looking at those opportunities coming at them, but it kind of feel like they're only going to put the money behind it once the dominant design is out there. And that is probably going to be proven a bit more in the UK, in the US, Asia, and so forth. And then Switzerland will probably be a bit later.
I also think that some fundamental things within the banks are not really solved. So, for instance, like accessing the data, sharing data in a confidential way, for instance, like speaking of confidential computing, for instance, or also making sure that the data is actually usable for these use cases. I think these are kind of fundamental things before you can really apply AI, machine learning, and these kind of things, which are not, developed as they.
Andreas, I have a little comment to that. Thanks for bringing this up. You might be surprised, actually. A few banks do have a sandbox with confidential cloud computing, which they offer to a few chosen ones to manipulate and try out the data that the bank has, or maybe even upload some data from the outside and try it to, into the banking ecosystem. However, I must say, having a little Swiss heritage in terms of a corporate culture in private banking, it's clear that most of the Swiss banks would be very reserved in who they give access to for such things. And we still have a long way to go before this works in an efficient way. So truly, I think the common consensus is that we should build an ecosystem that has a unanimous and common understanding of what's trustable and what's not. And startups / investors into these startups should come together and address the subject as a one unit, rather than every single startup duplicates the pitch for why they should be trying out in a big organization, a large bank or an insurance company, and so on and so forth. So that's where I think the transformation needs to kick in. And this is why we're still slow.
I absolutely agree. And funnily, we invested in the confidential computing startup, right? So the technology is actually available. I mean, the technology can be deployed on any cloud platform, for instance, but the point is that, you know, the banks are not even ready to go into the cloud. So I think this is what I wanted to say, right? The adoption of this kind of solution is not there yet. And I think before you have reached that level of, you know, like standardization and infrastructure, you can't think of, you know, applying some AI things and data sharing models, because, you know, it's still not possible. But I think
I'm happy you're mentioning this. So sorry for interruption, Andreas. I'm happy you're mentioning this, because I think there is a very important distinction here. The bigger the bank, the more probable they have a contract with a large IT company, such as Amazon or Microsoft or Google, that offer this cloud computing, and they try to do it internally for a few years before they open up. And it's also the reason why publicly it's not entirely obvious. However, if you look into different kinds of sources, news and interviews, you could get the bells rung in those articles that the banks are already on this track. I guess the bigger question here is not that the technology is accessible or not, but rather how fast are we adopting? And Switzerland is notorious for being a slow adopter into the, you know, the 200-year-old industry such as private banking.
Does this come from a legal perspective, Gunter, that the banks are reluctant to adopt cloud solutions?
Definitely. I mean, I wouldn't call it so much legal as regulatory, right? Because every major change in the business model obviously needs approval by the auditor / FINMA, and that must be done properly, right? And again, I mentioned it before, it's about the dominant design, right? Once you have something that's standard, then you can just plug in by getting an add-on to your core banking system, then it's easy. But as long as you're trying something totally new, that's obviously a challenge that we must not underestimate as well.
This is when we go to networks as well. Know that it would be much easier if all the banks came together and decided on one solution and then went to FIMNAT with this one solution, as opposed to every bank applying their own solution. And this is where we go back to Sergali and the ecosystems, to come together, and actually progress is done better by a network of people as opposed to on an individual basis. No, Sergali?
Absolutely. And I think we have done something in Switzerland in general throughout various organizations to create and show the world that the value of network matters. I mean, just a step aside from this conversation, I think Swiss people would agree with me that personal and corporate network in Switzerland is one of the key components of career building here. And that really drips into every single corporate culture of large organizations here. So it's back to my comment about the limits of current practices and artificial intelligence inside the banks. VC being the proposed solution to ensure a stable inflow of innovation, having a network is everything, truly. Only through the network, most of the investors actually invest. It's because someone else has already invested or recommended. That's it.
It's let me link a parallel but with Switzerland and Singapore. Actually, just I recently, like 6 months ago, moved back actually from Singapore to Switzerland. There we see the networks actually a little bit differently, as the government is actually, the regulator is actually maintaining control of the entire ecosystem of the financial innovation and financial industry. So GovTech or other organizations that are actually managed and centrally controlled decide and practice and test proof of concepts of different solutions that are out in the market. So most of the innovation actually comes from them, and they are the ones that deploy it across the board to most of the players. So on one hand, you could see that it's centralized, so it's not really following the decentralized model or DeFi model of future of finance. But at the same token, we know that the centralized solution is properly deployed and properly controlled and properly regulated, in line also with the MAS regulation for the innovation and for the control of the banking system and the financial system. So there's comparisons which are similar, there's comparisons which are not similar, but generally we can link the parallels between the two countries, as one and the other model both actually prove to be right going forward. So yes, networks, as mentioned by Sergey, is exactly the key to success.
There's a reason they call Singapore the Switzerland of Asia.
There's many reasons.
There's a lot of similarities between Switzerland and Singapore. I think one big difference is actually how the regulator behaves, right? So in Switzerland, I think they're more like not playing the one who wants to, really foster innovation. It's more like really regulating, but from my point of view, in a quite clever way. So not regulating actually specific use cases, regulating the technology. So it's a difference, if you look at, what's happening in Singapore, where it's very much top down, right? Very centralized, MIS driven, but they have the beauty of, having a lot of power of influencing and attracting a lot of companies coming to Singapore, right? So that means they're a little bit faster in attracting capital and, creating that, ecosystem than Switzerland, but there are a lot of similarities because both countries are small, so they have to play a specific role within the industry, and I think that's also a reason why it perfectly makes sense that there are a lot of joint forces, initiatives going on, and there's going to be the 0.0 forum this week here in Switzerland, where it's very much aligned with the Singapore FinTech Festival, which is the same organizer. So MA is coming to Switzerland, and there are a lot of exchanges also on government level. I think from that point of view, that makes perfectly sense. We from F10, we run incubators in Singapore, we run incubators here in Switzerland. So we see a lot of also network effects of connecting companies between Asia and Europe. So from that point of view, I think it's a very interesting aspect also to talk a little bit about differences of the ecosystems. And especially when it's about regulation, you see like the two different approaches. But, at the end of the day, it's all about the players and how they interact with each other. And it's not really right or wrong from my point of view.
Well, I half agree. I think it's very, very important that you have networks, right? You see it in areas where you don't, like Excelexis, which has been mentioned, which is really focusing on circular economy projects. And there is hardly a network there to support it, right? There's maybe, I don't know, I can count the investors in Switzerland on one hand, right, that are focusing on that. And the same was true for FinTech and everything that is today the greater network in this area. And I think we really, really need people to work together, because that is really what kind of gives everything a push to, hopefully make it come true right at the end.
While we're on the topic of accelerators, maybe Andreas, you would like to tell us a little bit more about F10 and how it went from a local accelerator to now a global one, and maybe to tell us a little bit. You've already went into a little bit what you do on the global scene, but what's been your vision for F10 and what's been your main learnings these last few years?
Yes, thanks very much for that question, and it very well fits in the discussion before. So we consider ourselves as a global innovation ecosystem with the ambition to bring more innovation into the industry, and we want to be inclusive. So we don't only act as an investor of investing into pre-seed companies. We also bring in the corporates, the incumbents from the industry, because we very much believe in exactly what we have discussed before, the open innovation approach. Right, that innovation is not happening within the corporates; it's actually happening outside. And we not want to make sure that at the end of the day, both sides can actually benefit from this. So bringing together the two different worlds, that's kind of our ambition with F10. So we're investing into early stage companies. In the meantime, we're active in four markets. So in Switzerland, we started back in 2015 with running, a lot of incubators. I think we've incubated around 120 companies in Switzerland already. Then we went to Singapore because we saw a lot of similarities there, very vibrant ecosystem. Also the chance, obviously, to reach out to the Southeast Asian region there and replicated actually what we have done here. We also learned that it's a bit different in Singapore than in Switzerland because there's a lot of money flowing from the government into corporate innovation, for instance, which is a bit, like a competition to our model because we offer services to corporates that they come to us and we help them to find the right startups where they can invest or partner with, which is a bit different to here to Switzerland. But I think from a focus on the financial insurance industry, both countries have established financial centers, and that's why we said, okay, it makes perfectly sense to cover these two markets because innovation is not only happening in Switzerland, obviously, even though we have very good technical universities and so on. So that's why we said, let's go to Singapore and build the bridges. That was our first step. Then he also said, we want to have a presence in the European Union with a big home market. That's why we went to Spain, which is actually a completely different thing. So if you look at the ecosystem there, I think it's, I would say, like not as developed as Switzerland, but it's, from a country perspective, much bigger. There are a couple of very digitized banks, I would call them, right? Which also, are very much into venturing and investing and corporate venture capital. So that was our third step. And the last step of an expansion is now, we're going to the Nordics, Baltics region, but with a very specific focus on climate, fintech, and sustainable finance. Because we learned, up in the Nordics region, there's a completely different mindset around that topic. And because we believe very much into the potential of, fintech, influencing or fintech becoming the catalyst for capital flowing into climate tech, we are now running a specific dedicated program in Stockholm for this. And that makes us, becoming a much more global network. We're not covering all markets. I think one of the next steps for F10 will most probably also be covering some emerging markets, calling about Africa or maybe Latin America, which would then complement the global network. At the end of the day, we want to have the best startups, pre-seed startups joining our network, and we want to have on the other side the most innovative and digitized corporate partners.
One final question for you. Earlier on this year, the rules for the scope of investing for pension funds was laxed, allowing pension funds to invest into fintech startups. Have you seen this already adopted by pension funds? Have you seen an inflow of cash after the laxing rules?
I think there is something going on in the back, I would say. As always, here in Switzerland, things are not, made public at the very early stage. I think there's a movement towards that. I haven't seen massive money flowing into startups now from pension funds. I think it's also maybe from a timing perspective at the moment probably a little bit the delicate thing because the market is going down quite a bit. But I think it's a long-term game, right? We are all in VC, so we know it's not just something you can achieve results within a short time. So I think that change is definitely good. But the question is a bit, how do we execute it, and what are the right models to implement it? So I would expect that pension funds now also start to look at VC funds where they can actually maybe do fund investments. I'm rather skeptical on pension funds becoming own VCs because I think this is definitely not their turf. So they should make up their minds a bit and find a strategy how they can cleverly deploy their capital. But also at the end of the day then generating the returns, because I think it's not so easy. It seems, it looked quite easy the last couple of years. because, you know, everything went up like crazy. But now, you know, when you are a little bit in a different market situation now, it's also differentiating a bit, you know, those who really can make good deals from those who just, you know, spray and pray. So from that point of view, yeah, I'm very curious to see how that develops.
Thank you, Andreas. Me too, absolutely. Any
and
other?
Also, just a little comment maybe for you, Andreas. How is it for you guys in terms of focus? Because what we have actually experienced and seen that in VC, one thing is obviously to be generic and to be obviously open to new innovation, new technologies, new solutions out in the market, and finding what's interesting. And a lot of people are sort of scattered, going around, oh, I find this interesting, I find that interesting. But isn't that better that some of the VCs are actually focused on certain pillars and say, okay, you guys are focused on 4 pillars, let's say, some other focus on 1 pillar, like Günther or myself, we're focused on AI, they're focused on circularity. I find that this way, bringing the innovation in the industry further is actually more accelerating in its own self rather than being spread out.
I mean, I'm 100% convinced on, you know, on being dedicated on a vertical or maybe an industry, and not being the completely generalist VC, right? Because I think, how can you actually make sure that you have enough expertise? And also, how can you make sure that you can really create an ecosystem with different, you know, different players who help you actually to do the right investments if you're investing in literally everything? I mean, I would not even be able to, you know, say, you know, I'm able to do a good deal within life science, for instance, because I have no clue about life science. So I'm a little bit skeptical on, you know, this very generalist VC who invest in all different aspects. I mean, from the portfolio diversification point of view, that's maybe clever, right? Because you don't have actually a risk into one specific industry. But, you know, from an expertise point of view, it's very, very difficult, I would say. So that's why we only focus on finance and insurance, for instance, but there obviously we also invest in many, many different sub-verticals to achieve the diversifications in the portfolios. But you can still benefit from what we have learned in payments, for instance, also for lending, because there's still, you know, similarities, you know, the underlying technology is maybe similar. You see the business models also you can compare. But I think this is, for me, it's clear, right? Focus on something which with the you know, respective ecosystem, you know, helping you actually to do the right investments. This is definitely a competitive advantage compared to, you know, being a completely generalist VC.
This is amazing that you guys are into intensivity when it comes to investing into something specific where you build up, you know, the know-how and the base of expertise and everything. However, one thing that Jasmine and I had a earlier conversation about the concept called curation. Large organizations that have clients, but specifically talking about private banks, we're all about curation. When it comes to private clients, they would like to know different things, very diversified things. And when it comes to innovation and venture capital, they would like not only the banker, but also a partner of the bank and maybe another client to converse with them on what they think about various types of innovation and where the industries are going and so on. Therefore, there is a counter opinion to being intensively specialized into one type of VC, to be also generalist enough in order to curate your audience. When the audience comes through to a large organization, they ask this large organization to be the one-stop shop for all kinds of questions. And I have experienced quite some occasions when clients or groups of clients would come in and ask us about life sciences and ask us about all kinds of other startups, but also because they start the startups, they have interests. And I think it would be correct to not leave out the next generation of clients that is the most sort of startup friendly generation that currently produces questions. I'm sure you've heard of research that shows that next generation who inherits the money of the first generation, most of the time does not want to hire the same banker. And this is what the banks are trying to counteract right now by curating the next generation, the topics that are interesting to the next generation, and clearly be really everywhere a little bit generalist, but at the same time, an expert in fintech specifically.
Well, I think it's very important that you mentioned that, because just looking at the classical Swiss banking scenery, that is very much tailored to where it came from, right? It's essentially, if I need to break it down, is an environment that was built by man for man. And if you look into the next generation, that's going to be very diverse, right? So it's going to be a lot of work to be done in there. And I hope the technology will be leading that way, right? But I think that many will not make it also, to be honest, right? And this is also a chance for new guys entering, and guys and girls, I should say, entering that space, as we're hopefully seeing it very soon as well.
Fully agreed, Gunther.
I think also one point just to mention, certainly, yes, it's going to be diversified, but at the same time, it's also going to be multi-generational, because before that was the leading and the working generation that was leading was deciding on the banking model for the family. Now is the entire family, including the kids and the teenagers, who decide themselves where they invest, what they do. And now we know the millennials are taking the predominant role within private banking and leading the banking forward. And they obviously have a very different approach in terms of control over the banking system and technology that they grew up with as technological nomads, or technological, so they grew up with technology basically. And now we look at the Generation Z, that's a completely different ball game when we're looking at gaming actually entering banking, and that sort of level of control where you play and you put banking and financing at every level of your day-to-day operation and day-to-day being.
Any final remarks?
I guess maybe I'll make a final remark. Since we've talked about really many things on this panel, but I'd like to propose a call to action. I think it's all about network and curation. Unless we have a unanimous approach to how we build this larger global ecosystem together, so that everyone has a sort of at least a fallback standard entry into it, we won't be able to exclude duplication that currently happens so many times. And specifically regarding Swiss ecosystem, I think Switzerland is finally coming of age to enter a more efficient future, where Swiss organizations or international organizations that are based in Switzerland are more open to collaborate with everybody else in the world. But specifically, I'd like to make the two accents here, one on venture capital as a sort of the asset class that gives us a ticket into innovation. And the second accent onto artificial intelligence, even though it is an overbuzzed, overhyped word and term, I'd still like people to know what AI means for them and how AI is going to help innovate the, I guess, the banking industry from one side, but really just about any industry from the other side. When you put all of these together, you create a community that is curated and that is interesting really to anybody, even the bystander, because it's about learning something new and becoming future-proof.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for having joined us today.
Dear speakers, guests, and friends, I would like to thank again all of our speakers and partners for joining us in Angels Week Switzerland, for sharing your wisdom and leadership with the world. A special thank you goes to our media partner, Pitched, for producing our program. I believe the combined efforts and leadership of our speakers will bring Switzerland's economy to a new height, not only this week, but also in the future. We welcome potential collaborators to reach out to us because we believe Switzerland can add value to the economies in other countries. The Swiss per capita venture funding is ranked 3rd in Europe, only after the UK and Sweden. In 2021, we saw 35 new funds set up. The influx of capital is a testament. of the success of Swiss startups. So what now? Has Switzerland reached our full potential? No. With the current bear market that we are experiencing, now is the time for everyone to pause for a moment and revisit our fundamentals, even reinvent some. I would like to focus on one area, and that is genderless investing. Investment in women-led startups lags far behind male-led startups. Research has shown that startups with at least one female founder perform significantly higher than all male teams, higher in profit, in returns, in exit value, and in social impact. In fact, in 2021, despite only raising 2.2% of venture capital money, female founders built 14% of unicorns in the world. Investing women is not philanthropy, it is good business. Investment in female-led Swiss startups only improved slightly in 2021 compared to the previous years. How many of the top 10 funded startups in Switzerland last year had a woman on their executive team? 0. Swiss female-led startups closed 41 funding deals in 2021 from 26 closed deals and a total of $139 million. These figures suggest progress, but comparatively, growth in venture capital investment in women founders has stagnated compared to our male peers. According to the Swiss Venture Capital report that came out this year, the proportion of funding rounds closed by startups with a woman on the founding team is 11%, only 2% more than the previous year. The funding ratio in women and men is a stark 4% to 96%. I believe to close this gender gap, we need to act and move the needle together. I have 3 calls to action for investors. 1, increase investment in female-led ventures by at least 6% per year. 2, partner with female investors, not only because we are more likely to invest in women, but funds with a woman partner perform better. 3, use data-driven tools to augment your investment decisions and to prevent bias. My call to action for policymakers is this: make policies that favor and incentivize diversity, equity, and inclusion, because a sustainable and hopeful future is impossible without equitable opportunities for women, for us to build better products, companies, and industries. We are the majority of citizens. The evidence is clear from literature, and the proof is in the pudding. As we saw female-led exit value surge 30% in 2020, while male-led exit value dropped 44%. Women are better leaders, and our leadership shines in crises like a pandemic and challenges like building a startup. I will leave you with these final words. If you want ROI, return on investment, you need DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you. We look forward to seeing you next year.